and say, sort of formally welcome everyone to our weekly call. I hope you all had a fabulous weekend. I think those of us in Europe, but I think over the last week the weather has been good if you like sunshine. Not so good if you're trying to grow things, I guess, unless possibly it's wine, in which case it probably is quite good. But other than that, yeah, it has been sort of pretty hot, even in Finland, which some of you will know is where I was last week. Temperatures hit 30 degrees, which is unusual, to say the least. But anyway, so welcome to the call. In terms of topics this week, the main focus of the call, as you can see if you're looking at your screen, Vinny Parla has joined us. Vinny, according to his profile on the Cisco blog site, is a principal architect within the Cisco's Office of the Security CTO, which is sort of roughly analogous with what it says on your slide, Vinny. And Vinny has kindly agreed to join us to talk about Cisco's zero trust access products capability. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it's a very interesting series of announcements which came out during both Cisco Live and also Apple's WWDC events from a couple of weeks back, so earlier this month. And with some new capabilities in iOS and various other things, which this all seems to leverage. So Cisco, Vinny said he'd come onto the call, so this is pretty much hot off the press to take us through some of that capability, and then we'll sort of no doubt have some interesting questions spinning out of that. So should be a really interesting presentation. So Vinny, over to you, and those of you that joined early will be aware that Vinny's camera isn't working with the Zoom, so we're able to hear him but not see him, in case you were wondering. But anyway, Vinny, over to you. Look forward to the presentation.
Thank you everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to present this. So a lot of you have heard about zero trust access, ZTNA, VPN, and if you think about these technologies, they all have a shortcoming in that your experience is different when you're in the office versus when you're working remotely. And today, in a hybrid world, people aren't always in the office. In fact, they're more times than not out of the office. So we set out as a goal, how could we deliver an in-office user experience while not weakening the security of the solution? So we wanted to deliver a real zero trust solution end to end. We wanted it to be seamless to the end user. So remove the friction from the end user, keep the security controls in place for the IT admin. So as we set out on this journey, and really started this almost 2 years ago, we said, look, we're just going to build the simplest zero trust access experience. We're going to do it all on standards-based protocols, and we're going to hopefully get the entire industry to adopt this for zero trust. You could think of it as how IPv2 is to VPN standards. We want to make the MASC protocol, and a couple other things we're working on, the standards for zero trust access. So this is what we set out to do. So we said, okay, we're going to approach this all based on standards. We're going to use MASC because we think it has a lot of properties that work really well for zero trust access use cases. And then we want to tie enrollment in a way that is bound to your device, so that when you do a initial enrollment, only the device you enrolled from can be used as a MASC client. And so we created this new protocol, and it's really just a combination of a couple of protocols. So one protocol that's being implemented in OAuth, the OAuth team is behind this, is something called DPoP, Demonstration of Proof of Possession. And we combined that with Acme SSO for certificate enrollments and tied it all to biometrics. So when you do an enrollment, you'll be biometrically bound your identity that is on a particular device, and only that device will be enabled to do this new mask proxying functionality. And one of the cool things about this technology is, unlike VPN, we can actually bring microsegmentation all the way into the app running on the device. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we are able to deliver true end-to-end microsegmentation. So you hear a lot about microsegmentation, but most of these solutions only bring it part of the way. We're able to actually bring it from the application running on the device all the way through to the workload. And then in addition, we can do both source application, so the app on the device, and device attestation, and that's new in the zero trust industry. No other vendor is doing that, so that's a new capability. And again, our approach is all standards-based. We want everyone to adopt these. We want this to be like Wi-Fi. So Cisco will have a bunch of fantastic products in this space, but we want all of other competitors and OS vendors to support this as well. So in terms of features, this new capability called Enterprise Relay, there's no more device level VPN. So if you had to VPN into your company, you know it's device level. It's pretty much taking over control of your device. And you at that time may only be accessing a few corporate resources, but your administrator may have set up tunneling, so it's tunneling your banking traffic as well. So you kind of lose your privacy when you're doing your work, right? We wanted to build a solution that would allow you to, an administrator, give you access to the things you're allowed to have access to, but not interfere in your personal business that you might be doing on that device. And again, it's standard HTTP proxying, so it's well-established technology. And you can think of it as an OS level pack file. So every application on the device is proxyable. So it's not just limited to browsers. This means any application. So if you wrote an enterprise application and you had it in the store, the enterprise store for your devices, that application can be proxied transparently. The application doesn't have to add anything to it. It's all done by the OS. And then part of our design goals was to do privacy preservation, and we do this in a couple of ways, and I'll explain that. But one of them is that authentication tokens map to entitlements, not users and devices. So you're being authorized to access an application versus having identity about your device and user. And I can explain that a little more in detail. And then again, it's 100% standards-based technology. It's leveraging HTTP2 and HTTP3 forward proxying, and it's working on top of the mask standards that teams like Google and Apple and other vendors have been putting forward. So again, our goal is to just make it easy for you to go to work. You open your device and you're connected to your work apps, and you didn't have to do anything special. So you didn't have to start a VPN. You didn't have to think about it. You just flip your device open, and behind the covers, it's ready to go to work. So this is the new service we're building. It's going to launch in a couple of days, actually, officially, publicly. We've announced it at Cisco Live. But we're going to be building a new cloud service from Cisco, and it's going to have all of the capabilities to do security features like firewalling in the cloud. We can do all sorts of segmentation. We can support traditional VPN, but we have this new feature based on the mask proxy for zero trust access. So this allows an administrator to set very fine-grained controls and give you access to a much smaller set of network resources and applications than a typical VPN that gives you pretty broad access to the entire enterprise network. And then, as I said, our goal is your user experience is identical. So when you bring up a browser to go to your internal corporate website, and this is a mock page, it's not our real internal website, obviously. But conceptually, this is our internal website. And then on the right might be like a SharePoint app. And we want to be able to give the same access experience to both of those internal resources inside your enterprise in a way that just feels like a Wi-Fi experience. So you didn't have to do anything. You entered the exact same domains and connected to the same apps that you would as if you were in the office, but you're doing it from Starbucks or your home or wherever. So the workflow is pretty straightforward. There's a frictionless provisioning step. Once you've done this, and it's very strongly tied to the device, as I was talking using biometric auth, the user just enters the resource as if they were on-prem, and then because they've already done the enrollment, the policies will decide whether they get access or not. So an administrator can say, well, I don't allow Windows devices, so you can't connect with a Windows device or an Android device or whatever the policies are, or you have to have the latest antivirus installed, or it has to be an MDM managed device. Those are all policy driven. If you meet those policies, you'll be given access to those resources in a way that feels like an in-office experience. And one of the key reasons we chose Mask is because underlying Mask is quick, and that allows us to do things like multipathing, multiplexing, and also multiple tunnels. So we're not restricted to just one relay in the solution. So here's a look at, as was mentioned earlier, we did a collaboration with Apple, something we actually have been bouncing back and forth between Tommy Paula and myself for a couple of years. So Apple just announced support for this relay technology, and it's built in a way that's compatible with iCloud Private Relay. So if you have a device where you've enabled iCloud Private Relay and you're an enterprise customer and you connect to our Cisco Security Cloud, you will not be put through 2 levels of encryption. You'll actually have an optimized experience, and all of the privacy features of Private Relay will still work. So all of the IP hiding will still function. And because it's all entitlement based, we'll validate that the tokens presented entitle you to access to this resource. And that's sort of the design. So it's a very lightweight mask-based protocol design optimized to work with Apple's iCloud Private Relay technology. And there's a link in here, and Andrew, if you share that with the team, you can click on that link. That's the Apple developer video, talks about relays. This is all standards based, and it's all open on their platform. So, it's not exclusive to Cisco. This is a collaboration versus a partnership. And that was part of our intent. We want everyone to embrace these technologies. We don't want it just to be a Cisco offering. We want it to be any vendor who wants to offer this capability can do it. And similarly, we'll be delivering desktop clients that do the same thing. And we, are working with, I can't say who at this time, but we're working with other OS vendors to build this into their OS as well, so that it's just the way Zero Trust Access works for everyone. And that's important for us because if you look at all of the Zero Trust Access protocols that all of the other vendors offering Zero Trust solutions, they're all proprietary. That means that they're very hard to audit. There's inevitably going to be security vulnerabilities in those proprietary control plane or data plane technologies. And it makes it hard to interoperate. And we can't deliver similar features across all platforms. And so that was something we set out as an intentional goal here, to make this really like Wi-Fi, where it's all standards based and anyone can do it. Okay, so I talked about end-to-end Zero Trust. So typically the blue phrases here on the screen, most vendors do the things in the middle and the things on the right. So they do trusted device, trusted user, and trusted destination application, like you're going to the Exchange server. But we're the first vendor, and again, it's standards based, so any other vendor can do this now too. But we are the first vendor now to look at the actual source application. So now you can write policies like only the Outlook executable can connect to the Exchange server on this trusted device with this trusted user. So now you've just constrained down the possible sets of source applications that can connect to your servers in your data center, in your enterprise, and that reduces your exposure and risk significantly. right? So you can't, for example, launch curl. If you wrote that policy, you can't launch curl and say, curl, go connect to the Exchange server, right? So those are the kind of capabilities that we've worked with the OS vendors to deliver into market, and it's really building a true end-to-end zero trust ecosystem. Okay, so if you're not familiar with MAST, it's simply just it's a working group that's been working on HTTP2 and HTTP3 forward proxying, and the idea is that it can proxy any type of protocol, so UDP, TCP, but also IP. There's work going on with something called Connect IP. So in a sense, you could do everything really up the stack, including implement a full VPN style client using MAST. And then you're getting all of the great features of HTTP, like multiplexing and prioritization, and all of the great features, quick in terms of reliable delivery, unreliable delivery, all of the stuff that used to be just in TCP that now has been moved up into the quick layer in terms of retransmission and other optimizations. So you're getting all of those capabilities. And, again, our goal here is just to have this baked into the OS itself. So you're not installing a third-party client, you're just using the functionality of the OS, and you're able to get to your private resources just by setting some policies and provisioning on that endpoint device. And it's all encrypted end-to-end. So in this picture, in this example, going to www.in.acme.com, you're not man in the middling that traffic, you're just tunneling that traffic between the client application on the left and the destination on the right. Okay, so that is it in terms of the presentation. As I said, I'm just going to stop the share here. I can show a quick video. So let me share one more thing. I'm going to show a quick video of the experience using the Apple mask implementation. So here. Okay. So I don't know how well video will play here, but let's try it. Okay. Let me know when you can see the screen.
Okay, that's appeared, Vinny.
Okay. So is an Apple new Apple OS device. This has just been released and announced by Apple. So if you're a developer, you can download this today from Apple. And in this example, we're just going to show someone trying to access a private application, and you'll see here that they go to access the private application and they can't, and that's because they're not connected to work. So they do the onboarding, and you're just going to hand wave the onboarding part. But once this relay functionality is set up and the user has approved it, and they've done the installation of the profile. Once that step is done, from this point on, they're essentially connected to work, even though they're remote. And as you can see there, they are now able to access that dashboard. And you can see it was a very fast user experience. So unlike VPN, where you have to start the VPN, you got to wait till it comes up. Your resource is going to probably be pretty slow in terms of access. You can see that was pretty snappy access, and that was a real live production Cisco cloud ecosystem. So that that's not just something done locally. That really went out to the internet, connected to our cloud service, went to the enterprise where that was hosted, and served up that content. So that's it. I see we can have some questions.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Vinny. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and I can see that also Ralph has his hand raised. So let me ask the questions in the chat first, as I think they came in first, and then we go to sort of live questions. So anyone else who wants to ask a question, so if follow Ralph's example, raise your virtual hand, and I'll come to you in a moment. But in the chat, Kathleen has commented, I see you're using using device certain. Do you need the additional challenge types for users for any of your use cases? And she's flagged a particular draft on the ITF data tracker as well.
Let me look at the.
So basically, I'm wondering if there's interest in this draft because it is an adopted working group draft, but it's only applicable if you're also interested in things that require a user authentication. So it's just to extend Acme, but there has to be enough interest for this draft to go through, and Acme is kind of almost done. So if you're interested, I'm flagging it so that you can say, yes, we're interested in this because Zero Trust does cover the user as well. And we'd like these while the working group is active.
Yeah, I'll read through it. So what we built was, so our solution today uses Acme certificates and does automatic certificate renewal in the background, but it's tied specifically to the device and requires a biometric identity to get the initial enrollment. So it's device bound, which is
yeah, I'm familiar with the Acme work on that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll definitely take a look at this. I'm not familiar with this draft, but I will absolutely take a look and connect with you on it.
Excellent. Just, before the working group dies, if it should go through, that's the interest. But if it shouldn't, that's fine too.
Sounds good. I'll reach out to you on that. Thank you.
Great.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. Next one from Kurt, sort of a comment, but I think with an implied question. So it's a fully fledged internet overlay over the traditional network, while security-wise a true challenge. So I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, the question is, who should be the administrator for this security administration? Who should go to which service, for example? Where should you position the service center?
So this is an enterprise offering. So whoever manages your VPN today to give you access to private resources would be the same entity within your enterprise that would manage this. So, we're offering a cloud service offering for this, so that company would sign up for that, and they would then have their users enroll in this service to use it for access. So it's all enterprise provisioned and managed by your IT administrator. Same folks giving you VPN access,
okay,
or giving you access to Office 365. Same group would provide this as an offering for you to access your internal work resources in a way that's more secure and allows them to move away from traditional VPN technologies for remote access.
Okay, thanks, Vinny. And then final one from the chat, then I'll come to Ralph. And this is from Eric. How does the server application or mask policy enforcement know the client application is what it says it is?
So we're relying on the OS vendors to do that attestation. So for example, Apple has a closed ecosystem where apps are delivered through the App Store, and they have a way of validating the signature, the signing properties of those applications. And they have all sorts of anti-injection technology. So you can't, and this is true on Mac OS as well, so you can't inject third-party libraries into those applications. So we're relying on the OS vendor. We think they're the right folks to provide that level of attestation and security versus a third-party vendor doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a feature of the OS itself.
Yeah. Well, Eric, come back in a moment if you've got any follow-ups, but I'm conscious that Ralph has been very patient. So Ralph, you can ask a question live.
Okay, so I have actually a couple of questions. So Apple Private Relay has an ingress and an egress proxy, or proxy A, proxy B. What I saw in your presentation was only one connection. Does that mean that for the kind of traffic that goes onto the enterprise, that you're not having the kind of anonymity, but you're just having a direct connection? Is that correct? Or are you a proxy, sort of B or egress proxy in the Apple Private Relay sense?
So if you turn on private relay, we are an egress proxy.
Okay, good. That was
If you
the
don't turn on private relay, then we are essentially just an ingress proxy, serving up the resources directly. And you know, the IP privatization piece wouldn't be there, right? So iCloud Private Relay really is doing IP privatization. So it's really more about keeping your IP invisible to the ISP network, right? Your identity when you go to any web server is cookie based anyway, right? Like if you sign into your Gmail account, the web server knows who you are, right? So
yeah.
similar here,
I was just wondering what the integration was with Apple Private Relay, but that makes sense.
yeah, fully.
I mean, you said no.
Yep. Go ahead.
You said no DNS management, but I would assume that the kind of how do you say that, the direction that apps or browsers go when they do that is you have to have some profiles that define this domain goes to this kind of mask proxy and this domain goes to this mask proxy. And I guess you're doing that with MDM, is that correct?
No, so in here, and I didn't show these steps, but part of the configuration is to say what traffic to steer towards the enterprise mask relay. So when I say no DNS management, it means the IT administrator doesn't have to go in and expose like public DNS records of those private resources. They can remain private to your enterprise. So a lot of zero trust solutions, unlike VPN, expose your DNS, private DNS, to the public internet so that they can access those resources through public DNS. And this solution doesn't do that. So if you have some, you know, internal server called, you know, Ralph, you know, .acme.com, that's private to your enterprise. It's not going to be in a public DNS record. And you don't have to obviously manage that. So however you do your private DNS inside enterprise remains private.
But how would you say that? I mean, how would you make Safari on iOS to actually use your private DNS for that domain? That must be a configuration somewhere, or?
No, well, there's configuration. That's what I said. The relay configuration says whenever you're trying to reach ralph.acme.com, go through this mask proxy instead of going direct. So there's no DNS request at all from the client over the internet, right? It's all intent based. So very similar to a browser pack file. If you're familiar with a browser pack file, you can enter domains in a browser pack file. Those domains never go to the DNS resolver. They're scraped up out of the browser and then proxied based on the pack file policy. This is exactly the same conceptual capability, but imagine that pack file is at the OS level instead of inside just the browser. So now you have a pack file essentially for everything on your device, no matter what the application.
Yeah, and then the actual mask proxy would probably be in the DMZ or something, would do the actual DNS resolution.
Correct. That's all done on
for the enterprise domain.
Right. That's all done on the private side. So even if you didn't have a DNS entry, if you had host to IP mapping on the private side, that can be provisioned. So you know, you can essentially have faux DNS names if you have some sort of internal server you want to give access to.
Okay, thanks a lot. It was very interesting.
Thanks, Ralph. Anyone else got any questions? Again, you use the Zoom tool to raise your virtual hand, or by all means post them in the chat. if that is easier. And just give a moment or two to see if you have. Perhaps just while people are thinking, Vinny, this was sort of alluded to by one of the early questions in the chat, which I can't see now. What thoughts, if any, do you have on preventing this being sort of exploited by malware? Because I'm sure you would have thought about that, since malware seems to be a very early adopter of most new capabilities. So anything you want
Well,
to...
so as I said, our implementation and why we're trying to drive a standard around this is all tied to biometric authentication. So unless the malware can trick you somehow into completing some biometric authentication and workflow, it's not going to be able to inject itself into the proxy path, right? So as I said, the OS is enforcing what source applications are allowed to connect to proxy, and based on that, only those applications are allowed to connect. You know, if an attacker is able to inject into a legitimate application that the OS, you know, doesn't have protection against, then that's, you know, a new exploit that we have to deal with. But as I said, we're relying on the actual OS vendors to provide this enforcement, so they're best positioned to prevent code injection and other things in their applications.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not seeing any new.
So I saw in the chat from Kurt on auto config files. So none of this is an auto config file. This is, as I said, driven by an administrator giving you access based on your identity, and then you doing an enrollment and proving your identity using biometric authentication. And once you've proven your identity, at that point, we'll wire up the proxying functionality. We won't do it prior to that user identity proof.
Yep. Okay, Kurt, hopefully that addresses the sort of the implied question in posting the link from there. Right, I'm not seeing any other questions, I don't think.
Yeah, and look for announcements later this year. We'll have additional OS vendor support. As I said, we're building our own desktop client to support this, but we are also working with other OS vendors to just get this functionality built right into the OS, similar to the Apple technology. Again, all standards-based, which was part of our goal here, so that anyone can support this.
Yep. Excellent.
Thank
Well,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny, for explaining that, and for sort of managing to do so despite the sort of technology sort of letting us down a little. So that was very clear. Are you happy for me to share a PDF version of the slides post-call?
Yes.
Fantastic. So I'll do that with a link to the recording for everyone, so you can. And I've put the link that Vinny referred to. That's already in the chat. If you've been tracking that. So excellent. Well, thank you. Really interesting presentation. As you say, all standards based, which is encouraging. And yeah, from the sort of short video you showed, the performance appears to be pretty impressively sort of snappy, I think was the phrase you used, which I think is the right adjective. So yeah, good to see some innovation in this space. So very so yeah, thank you for running us through that. Right, let me just quickly change the subject slightly. I will share my screen. So give me a moment to do so. which I've now done. So hopefully you can see my slides. I'm just going to quickly mention, we touched on this last week. This was just the call last week. It was just at the start of Eurodig. I mentioned a couple of things, just one for fun and one for interest, and a couple of other comments. So this is a subset of the sessions which I highlighted last week as suggested ones for you to dip into if you had an interest in Eurodig. An observation first, it was a very diverse audience, both in terms of sort of gender, sort of ethnicity, etc., but perhaps most importantly, background. So yeah, it was a healthy range of different perspectives, some very technically orientated, some overtly policy, and some somewhere in between, and plus law enforcement and a bunch of other things which I can't immediately remember. Then a couple of anecdotes. The session on building mutual trust between China and Europe was absolutely fascinating. We had a sort of Chinese delegation in person in Tampere in Finland, who talked about building more trust between the sort of two economic blocks. The fascinating thing was when they went to questions or comments from the audience, because as you may know, Eurodig is intended to be very sort of participative. It was interesting that they took all the questions as comments, which they chose not to respond to, but instead they made additional comments, most of which were unrelated to the questions. So I'm not sure that necessarily built a mutual trust at all, but it was interesting to see that particular dynamic. So if you have a quiet half hour, 45 minutes or so, that recording would be worth watching, just to see most of the sort of questions from the floor completely being disregarded, and other stuff said instead. So it was quite fun, just before lunch. There was a whole series, sort of 3 different sessions on internet fragmentation. In my personal opinion, the case wasn't proven in either direction, whether it was a significant problem to be dealt with or not. But a reasonably wide range of views were expressed, some relatively strongly. So yeah, if you're interested in internet fragmentation, that may well be worth catching up with. Especially, I don't know with Eurodig if you can also see the comments that were put in the chat during the discussion. Hopefully they are also available, and that will make it more interesting if you're able to scan through those. And then finally, I just sort of mentioned we had a whole discussion around sort of rules regarding preventing access to child sex abuse material, partly because of the sort of current debate around the proposed new regulations within the EU. Again, quite a wide, diverse range of views were expressed, with people coming from sort of a completely different set of perspectives. So people involved from law enforcement and other bodies sort of around child protection. So again, if policies of interest to you, then I'd suggest that will be well worth catching up on. You'll see that I was reasonably active in that one, with a few comments from the floor. So any feedback on that, much appreciated post call, if that's a topic of interest to you. But anyway, a few things you might want to catch up on there. But definitely interesting session. I think all the better for having a wide range of sort of people with very different and diverse backgrounds, which made it much more sort of interesting event because of that. A quick reminder, some sort of dates coming up. So if you have any aspirations to present at APNIC, APNIC, sorry, deadline of 1st July, so next few days, so be aware of that. And then ITF 117, the cutoff for submissions, again, sort of 2 weeks away now, 10th of July. I think that might also be the cutoff for the standard rate reservation, standard rate fees, I think, as well. If not, that's certainly coming up quite soon too. So bear that in mind. And then the next one I'm aware of is 27th September, so a while away yet for UK NOF. But if anyone's got any other events that you think should be mentioned, then just drop me a line. I'll add those to this list for the next update. But other than that, the next forthcoming event on my list is ITF 117 in San Francisco, end of next month. So 4 weeks or so away to the start of that. A couple of days earlier for the hackathon. I think that starts on the 21st. I think 22nd is the Sunday. So hopefully there should be a good turnout. Last time I checked, I think there were about 600 people registered to be present in person. No doubt the number's gone up a bit since. Hopefully it will approach the level of the last ITF event in Japan, which is 1,000 on site, about 600 remote. It ended up at. So hopefully we'll see something like that for San Francisco. And then a slight gap until September when we've got the ICANN and related events kicking in. And I see Kurt's put in the chat, right, 87 in Rome. Okay, which I hadn't thought of there, the location on the list. So thank you. I will add that. That's in Rome. Thank you for that, Kurt. That's useful. I also heard, by the way, I won't say from whom, that I think the next ITF after San Francisco is Prague. The one after that is simply listed as Asia Pac. And I heard from a well-informed person last week that it's most likely to be in Brisbane, but there's still some final things to be agreed with the potential venue, I believe. But it's looking like there's a good chance it will be in Brisbane. So that will be not ITF 118, ITF 119. So for Asia Pac. Just so you're aware that that's looking quite possible. Hopefully more about that may well be said by the time we get to San Francisco, end of next month. Okay, finally from me, we have a sort of 70s theme next week. Peter will talk about the joy of text. He'll be growing a beard, so he's consistent with the illustration of that well-known piece of, should we call it, literature. And then after that, Andrei Meshkov from Agard will join us to talk about implementation of support for ECH within the various bits of Agard software and so on. You see a few other things on there. So that's the program at the moment. I've got a few topics to finalize dates for and then put them on the list. And again, if anyone's got anything else you want to talk about, please drop me a line separately. I'll happily talk about that. Kurt has put about sort of resource records contents. I assume I'll let Peter comment on that if he wishes. And that segues neatly anyway into any other business. So let me stop sharing my screen and say, does anyone have any other business? I don't know if Peter may have dropped off the call. I think he has. So yeah, you have to wait till next week to find out, Kurt. I think you may be right, but I'll let Peter sort of cover that next week. But any other business? Anyone got anything else that you wish to raise this week on the call? And if you do, pop it in the chat or sort of raise your hand and talk, whichever is easiest for you. But whilst you're thinking, if Vicky is still on the call, I think the bind support for, oh, my mind's gone blank. I was going to ask you a question about a feature that was due to come out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have sort of been doing something else, so I got a bit distracted. I think you're thinking about the DHCP, support DHCP for
Yeah, within the buying software that was due this month, wasn't it? I think.
discovery features.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we just postponed. We're coming out with a whole new stable branch, and it was going to be next week, and we pushed it out another week. So we had.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm just looking at your comment in the chat about the fact you're still doing some testing. I presume that's is that.
That was a comment about the Red Hat announcement. I was just being crabby.
Oh,
right. I mean, actually, I think I was making an excuse for being crabby, but
oh, fair enough.
just as a developer, the Red Hat restriction on restrictions on their source code is an issue because we use the downstream versions for CI testing. You know, the Oracle Linux.
Was that last week? That information came to the fore, or see, I think I read about it last week. Anyway,
Yeah, it feels like kind of over the weekend. It's sort of snowballed a bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
Vicky, you need no excuses for being crappy.
Well, anyway, it's just I understand that Red Hat has to make money. It's just it's hard to plan ahead with. We'll have to find something else to use in our CI.
Yeah. So apart from that, not much on at the moment then.
I can dig up and send you an email about I completely now forgotten what it is.
It was due anyway. Yeah, let's do that.
I think it was some it was a DHCP option for
So encrypted.
Finding an encrypted DNS server, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was. But anyway, rather than me not quite remember the question, having started to ask it, yes, let's do that, and we can clarify it separately. I also, by the way, I should have mentioned that the draft agenda for ITF 117 came out, I think it was on Friday or over the weekend. So no doubt, as always, that will be refined a fair bit between now and when it's finalised in 2 weeks. But anyone that wants to see the draft, that is available now. Should that be of interest. Right, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, so I don't think, unless anyone has got last chance to raise your hand if there's anything you want to highlight. Nope. Otherwise, thank you again, Vinny, if you're still on the call, for the presentation. That was very useful, much appreciated. Thanks for taking the time to do that. I will share the slides as well as link to recording post-call. Have a fabulous week, everyone, and look forward to catching up this time next week to hear all about the joy of text with Peter Lowe. So speak to you all then. Have a great week.